All right, first Vudu, guys, and I can tell you this, almost. Hey, what's going on, fellas? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for stopping by again. So today we're looking at one of the rarest group of optics out there, the 1-10 LPVO. And when I say rare, I only say that because right now it's the current leading edge of LPVO development. And when I say leading, I really mean, hey, this is really hard to do, so be prepared for compromise. And because they're so hard to do, there just aren't very many of them out there. On this channel, we've only looked at a few. The first one was the Vortex Razor 1-10 that we looked at in the premium LPVO video. That's the closest to the do-it-all scope that we all really want, although it did sacrifice some clarity on the 1X end to do that. And the second scope we saw recently was the Mars 1-10, which was a much smaller, compact scope. It pretty much offered everything you wanted, although it did have a proprietary mount, and also the illumination was a little bit disappointing considering its price point. So both those scopes were premium scopes, so they are priced accordingly. So now we have another big player in the optics market, EOTech, has come along and said, hey, we want to do a 1-10 as well, and we're going to price it below $2,000. So was this scope able to accomplish all that? Well, in summary, after having spent some time with it, I can tell you this. It is a great scope to look through. The optics are great. However, it does come up short when it comes to 1X performance. So to expand on that a little bit further, we're going to start at the outside, look at the profile and externals, and then we'll shrink in and we'll look at the internals where it really counts. So the first thing you're going to notice about this scope is aesthetically, this scope is really well designed. It looks great. From looking from the front to back, you can tell that they took their time machining the scope body, and it's just very smooth and very clean all the way through the entire scope. I actually like the way this knurling looks on the back as well. So given its price point, we can tell that EOTech spent its time and said, hey man, make sure these users get their money's worth, at least when it comes to machining of the scope body. So as far as length and weight, you can tell it's not too crazy. It's only about ½ inch longer than the Vortex 1-10. It's not as long as a Vortex PST 1-6. And as far as weight, it comes in at about 21 ounces. So that's the same weight as the Razor 1-10 and also the same weight as the Razor 1-6 Gen 2E. So speaking of that weight, EOTech did choose to go to a larger scope body. So they went from 30 to 34 millimeters, just like the Vortex 1-10. I think that's generally a smart move. Usually when you move that to a larger body, you get a couple things out of it. Number one, you get a much stronger scope body, so it's a lot more durable. But number two, you actually have more elevation adjustments because you have more room. So since we're talking externals, let's go and take a quick look at the controls on the outside because I think they did a really great job with those. All right, guys, so when we're talking the controls, the first one we're going to talk about is the turrets. The turrets are kind of funny because when I look at the turrets and play with them the first time, I was like, hey, man, did you guys make up your mind whether you're making an LPVO or an MPVO? Because an LPVO, we generally don't dial, and we need, covered low-profile turrets. But EOTech said, okay, yeah, we'll do that, but we'll only do it for the windage knob. On their elevation knob, they said, hey, no, we'll just leave that in case you want to dial. It does lock, so you can't turn it without lifting it up, and then you turn it. I guess that's okay to leave it in there. It still is relatively low profile, but in my opinion, I like cap turrets for my LPVOs. So on the back of the optic, you'll find the diopter and the magnification dial. The only thing I want to mention about the diopter is sometimes the magnification dial will turn, so you got to hold it. And it turns pretty smoothly, just that if it moves though, there's no witness mark. Keep that in mind. So to the magnification dial, it does come with a lever that you can screw in. It's short, it works really well. The reason why I like this is not only is it easy to turn, you can use your whole hand to do it. And I think that gross motor movements, from what I've seen under stress, is a lot better than relying on a lever. So in my opinion, you don't really even need a lever on this because you can just take your hand and turn it easily to whatever you need to go to. So I think it's a great design. EOTech did an excellent job with it. Lastly, on the left side, you'll find kind of a unique design, the illumination brightness control. So I like it because it's a push button design. There's not very many push button designs in LPVOs, but on this design, they did the 3-button design. So the top button turns on and off, and the front and back lower and raise the brightness. It's kind of stiff to turn, and they don't really offer a ton of super clicky feedback to let you know that it's pushed. So you kind of have to look and go, oh, okay, it's moving. In my opinion, I think a rotary dial still works better, although I do like that they decided to try this because it did save space and probably weight as well. It just wasn't executed completely well. Okay, so now we take a look at externals and profiles and controls. We'll zoom in now and take a look at the glass performance. All right, fellas, so in the beginning I mentioned the word compromise, and usually when we're talking glass quality, that's usually the first place we start to see it, especially in a scope with this large of an optical range. And the first element that you usually see some compromising is the glass clarity. So to kind of measure that, the first thing we look at is on 1X, we want to look at the edge glass clarity. So I start by looking at the center, and then when I start moving to the edge, do I start to see some distortion? It's really only within the last maybe 15% or so, as far as, starting to see some distortion. The glass on this is very clear, it's Japanese glass. And really, I don't think you have any complaints about edge clarity on this scope. So along with that really great glass, you'll also notice that its field of view is really wide. It's actually a little bit wider than the Vortex Razor, if I'm not mistaken. It is right up there with the Primary Arms PLX 1.8 compact that we looked at earlier. Additionally, it also has a thin bezel design. This definitely helps to give it a relatively flat image. So now you've got clear glass, wide field of view, and a thin bezel. That trio helps make any LPVO almost close to red dot performance. So speaking of red dot performance and that Primary Arms, so if field of view, glass quality, and bezel were the 2 steps forward, illumination would be the 1 step back or 1.5 steps back for the EOTech. Unfortunately, even the brightest setting, it is not daylight bright. It is daylight red, just like the Primary Arms and Superset CA jargon. Because of that, basically, unless you're shooting at a white target, it's very hard to see the center reticle light up and provide enough contrast for you to go target focus and shoot like that, like a red dot. So every time I shot it, every drill that I've noticed, there was always like a little pause so I can find the center of the reticle and see it before I press the button. So speaking of 1X, another thing that helps you shoot at 1X performance is the reticle design. EOTech is known for their donut of death and their red dot. So you got a 6 to 8 MOA ring with a very precise 1 MOA dot, right? So on that reticle, you can use it for target focus and quickly finding the reticle so you never lose it. Well, on this optic, they tried to do that and they did not succeed. And the biggest reason for that is just really the outer ring, the speed ring as they call it in the documentation, is just much too big to be useful. So according to the documentation, it's 66 mils wide, so around 220 something MOA, somebody check my math. At 5 yards, if you were to put that speed ring on a target, it basically would enclose the entire C-zone, right, at 5 yards. At 10 yards, see, that ring would enclose the entire silhouette. You basically have to be right on your target in order to be useful. So really, I don't think it's very helpful at all. Yeah, it's got T-bars to help you kind of locate it, but in my opinion, I was not able to locate it under speed, under running any type of drill quickly. I was just basically, if it's a white target with a lot of contrast, you can find it a little bit quicker, but if it's shadow or low contrast, it is hard to find. So speaking of finding, I do want to make a note about eye relief and eye box. So on your eye relief, the biggest difference on this optic is at 10X. People always say, hey man, the 10X eye box is super tight. So yeah, you're gonna run into that with pretty much anything with a 10X on the top end, especially with an LPVO type objective lens. So remember, the exit pupil gets really small at 10X. If you're gonna go to 10X and you need to shoot long range, find the center of the reticle that's the brightest from back here and just push your head straight in so you get the full sight picture. That's gonna be an issue. I would not shoot from a VTAC barricade or anything with an angle at 10X, because that's gonna be a pain in the ass. But if you dial down to 8 or 6, that's gonna help you out a lot, because remember, the extra pupil is gonna get bigger. This extra pupil on this optic is 28 millimeters instead of 24 on most LPVOs, and that does help a little bit, but I wouldn't depend upon it if you need to get in some weird angle. Now, having said that, at 1X, the eye relief and eye box on this thing is plenty. I mean, it is very wide, so no matter where your cheek ends on this, you're gonna get a very nice full sight picture with that relatively thin bezels. So while we're talking about zoomed up at 10X, I noticed on the glass on this and the color and contrast. So the color is more of a neutral, which is I really like because it's a little bit easier to find targets when the colors are a little bit neutral. And also the resolution. So this scope is actually very sharp. Once you hit like 8X or so to go to 10, it does lose a little bit of resolution. So you'll notice getting a little bit soft. I don't think it's super, I don't think it's a showstopper in that case, but you will notice it when you're doing it, especially like a slow zoom, okay? So it's still perfectly usable in my opinion. Additionally, one other thing you'll notice when you're looking at magnification, if you're sensitive to it, because I always mention it in every video, is there is some color fringing on this optic. So if you're on a bright day, you're hitting one of those white targets, you're going to get a little bit of purple fringe, right? So it's not as bad as Nightforce NX8, so it's not going to be, purple rain. So since we're talking long range now and the reticle under that shooting under distance, let's take a closer look at it when we're talking long range. All right, fellas, so for long range, this scope comes with 3 reticles. 2 of them are mill-based and one of them is MOA-based. The MOA-based one is the SR4. It looks similar to the other ones, except it's a T reticle, so there's no wind holds, right? So it's a very straightforward reticle. The 2 mill-based ones, one of them is the LE5, and the 2 mill-based reticles are exactly the same, except the LE5 has this weird crosshair in the middle of a circle dot, which is kind of weird looking. I don't know why you would want that. So if this is your reticle, please tell me why you chose that. In my opinion, the best reticle is the one we're looking at in this video, the SR5. So on the SR5, the reason I really like it the most is because number one, it's in the center, it's got a 0.25 MRAD dot, so it's very precise, very small. So if you're shooting for groups, it's great for getting a very precise zero. And also there's plenty of spacing around that center for like spotting, helping track targets, for spotting misses, etc. So it's a very clean looking reticle inside that donut. Additionally, for the ladders, on the side ladders, you have 1/2 mil increments on the side ladder, so that's great for ranging if you need that. And if we're talking about the big ladder down at the bottom, it goes all the way to 12 mils, so a very long range reticle if you need it to be, and it's very easy to understand. So you got the big hashes, the distance between those is 1 mils, and in between you got 1/2 mils between those hashes. Now this is a Christmas tree reticle, so you got plenty of wind holes on each side. I think it goes out to 5 mils on each side. There are 1 mil space wind hole, so it's perfect for shooting in wind. So really, I don't think you have any complaints about this reticle. It kind of serves like a lot of different purposes for long range shooting. Really, the only thing it's missing is maybe the range indicators that some of the primary arms reticles are famous for. But since it has mils on the sides and on the ladder itself, you can use those for ranging just fine. Now, the only complaint I think is if you're looking at the 1 mil mark, I don't like how it kind of stops. And the 1 mil mark has at the bottom of the donut, and that's basically what you have to use to aim off of. Personally, I just really like a line going through it or a dot to make it a little bit more precise, but that's really a minor complaint. So you guys know that I watch this channel. Next thing we're gonna do is verify our holds in Strelic and then go out to the long distance range, shoot some steel and see if those holds are dead on. So here we are in Strelic Pro again to get our holds. So as far as our test ammo rifle, we're primarily using 69 grain reloads, going 2650 with a 100-yard zero out of our Criterion 16-inch barrel. As far as the reticle, Strelic has all 3 reticles, so be sure to select the right one you're using. Here we're using the SR5 MRAD reticle. For our long distance shoot, we'll be shooting a 6-inch steel rounds from 232 to 540 yards or 200 to 500 meters. We shot this optic with both 223 and 308, so no concerns there as far as holds and durability. Let's just see how those holds track to our actual results. 237. 237 should be 1 mil down. Hit. 340. Hit. So 340 should be 2 mils down. 440, 3 mils down. Hit. 520, we'll try 4 mils first. Hit. All right, fellas, so for final thoughts, let's take a look at this Vudu 1 to 10 and see where we are in regards to price versus performance. So for $1,750, it's sitting in the same price territory as a previous Nightforce NX8. And there's not a ton of scopes with this kind of capability in that price range. We also have the primary arms 1/8 compact, which is a little bit less at $1,500. So knowing that both those other scopes are 8X on the top end and this scope here is 10X on the top end, considering it's about the same price range, you'd say, hey man, with great glass and also a great control set, I think it's gonna be a very good deal. However, for some reason, I've always come back to that kind of disappointment I felt looking at it through a 1X. As far as, the glass and the field of view is beautiful, but unfortunately the illumination in the 1X reticle is not that great. Having said that, I've noticed that guys are starting to run red dot offsets as kind of a standard equipment now for the LPVOs. So they're no longer depending upon, hey, I need a really bright reticle at 1X for all my 1X needs. So if we're moving to that, and that's going to be you, I think that if you need something that's going to be, hey, very close to LPVO capability, but still, you know, within the price point and also the size of an LPVO, I think is a very good choice. The more I use the scope, the more I like it. For kind of a general purpose scope, it's just right up there with primary arms as far as capabilities. So if you need something at a 10x top end, take a look at the scope. All right, fellas, so that's it for me. Hopefully this helped you. If this video helped you, please like and comment, because it does help this small channel keep growing. And thanks for coming back to this channel. I'll see you guys again next time.